Greetings and salutations, everybody. Welcome to another edition of the Severe Takeaways here on the SevereMMA YouTube page. I am E. Spencer Kite, your friendly neighborhood Spencer man. He is Harry Powell in beautiful London town. Good, sir. We had a return to the UFC Apex. We had a return of UFC action after a week off, the first of 8 consecutive weeks with UFC fight cards. We started a little later because it was originally supposed to be in Seoul, South Korea, so we maintained the later start time. I will tell you, as a 44-year-old man, staying up past midnight was difficult. I understand that that falls on deaf ears, speaking with European friends who do this all the time. I've always maintained that I don't know how y'all do it, because just no. How are you, sir?
I'm well now, thank you. I thought the card was all right overall. I think there's some points to make, some good, some bad, some interesting points to make. I'm sure you'll get into it, but we must talk about Laura Sanko. I did this to me is maybe the biggest compliment I could give Ms. Sanko.
You listened to comms.
I listened to some comms, yes. And I thought she was fantastic. I thought that, she's been ready for this for a while, right? But getting your call to the big show and doing the things, and especially at a weird time and all that stuff, it's a test of your mettle at any time, right? And to go in and to fit into the booth so seamlessly as she did, big props. I thought she's a great addition and a great voice.
Yeah, so let's start there, because I do think that the UFC did it the right way. We've been waiting for this moment for a while now. Laura's called the last 2 seasons of Contender Series. She and I have spoken about this particular moment several times over, this being her goal. I knew for a little while that it was happening and couldn't let the cat out of the bag because it's not my story to tell. I think the UFC handled it perfectly by having it be the road to UFC finals. She called them all the way through with John Gooden. I thought it was terrific that John was on comms as well. They have a great rapport, very good chemistry. Bisping is a fine addition to the booth. He's Bisping. He brings his flair to things. I thought throughout the show, John and Laura were great. Me and Bisping just have a weird relationship when it comes to comms. He's not my favorite guy. I know there are people that love him. I would prefer someone else. But I think for a first event, she smashed it. I know you didn't listen all the way through. I did, because I wanted to hear both John Gooden, who has been on this on a conversation with and is a good friend, and Laura throughout the broadcast, just to see how we progressed. Because as you said, doing Contender Series is one thing. Doing Road to UFC, even in Singapore when it's an empty arena, or Abu Dhabi when it's an relatively empty arena and not a ton of people watching, is one thing. Having a week of, hey, Laura Sanko's calling these fights, and it being one of the primary stories is a little bit different. We talk about it all the time with fighter debuts. This was commentary debut, and I think she did really well, and I'm really happy to know that there's going to be more of it quickly. It's not going to be and now Laura won't call an event for 6 months. She will get some regular reps, and I think that's only going to continue to improve not only her, but the quality of the broadcasts and create greater opportunities for people going forward.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's something to be said about, even from an overarching philosophical perspective, how you've got this road to UFC, which was a slightly different format for bringing fighters into the UFC, an interesting format. And we got some great fights out of it, right? And alongside those newcomers that have now come into the UFC banner wholly, some of them have come in wholly to the UFC banner. You've also got a brand new UFC broadcaster coming into the proper banner wholly. And again, I don't mean that to diminish any of the things that she's done previously, Contender Series, Road to UFC, anything like that. But when it is a UFC card, and that is whether that's Fight Night pay-per-view, that's a very, very different prospect than the Contender Series. A Contender Series is what, 6 fights, 5 fights? This is a 7-hour, here's the broadcast.
Right, exactly.
Do the things, make sure you slot into all the perfect moments. Here's your timings, off you go. And so, yeah, I was really, really impressed also. And I think something that Megan O'Leary said on a conversation with sticks with me. And that's that she said that the women that are around the UFC, they all respect each other because they know how hard it was to get there. But there is a level of competition that spurs the rest of them on, and it doesn't turn into a jealousy or rivalry in a heated or sort of a contentious way.
Right.
But it's something that, of course, Megan wants to be the lady on the broadcast the entire time. Of course. And why wouldn't she? That's what she's worked for. And in the same vein, you know, Laura might want that same role. Laura might want a role on the commentary. And now that she's got it, it's like, okay, here's the bar now. And not only am I there to challenge myself and the rest of the commentators, because there's a young buck, a new person on the panel who's coming with all the enthusiasm and is coming with all this energy. You have to up your game now. And I mean, personally, adding her with Bisping, it's kind of a here's the older veteran type guy that's gonna steward you through this. Is it the right guy? I mean, you know, that's a conversation for another time. But I think it was good of the UFC not to just do a 2-man or a 2-person booth. I think, you know, we have to say now. Yeah, really impressed with Laura Sanko. Really impressed with her sort of learning arc and her development arc over the course of this little last couple of years. Shawnee put out a tweet saying, you know, Laura was mentioning throughout some of her comms about slams and the judging efficacy of a slam. And it was really cool to see that connection, right? Because Shawnee's talked before about him and Laura having some conversations about judging and her wanting to do the extracurricular work. And that just reminds me a little bit of Brian Stan, where he'd come in with 17,000 pages of notes for a single fighter. And, you know, that level shows me that you care about the sport.
Yeah, she's done the work. She connected with Kevin McDonald, veteran referee, to do the judging and officiating course, which she has passed. She is licensed. She can do this if called upon in various states. And so it reflects that level of commitment that I want to see, frankly, from people at that level. And to what you were saying about sort of the competition and the rising tide lifting all ships, I think it now spans beyond gender lines. If it hadn't before, right? Laura, in a sense, breaks that glass ceiling of first female commentator. But if you don't think Michael Chiesa is sitting in the studio doing the studio show going, okay, now I need to get a chance to do play-by-play. I got to get those reps. If you don't think Juliana Pena and Angela Hill, who have done the studio show and done some commentary outside of the UFC for different promotions, look at Laura and go, okay, I got to get more reps. How do I now get on Contender Series as, you know, the backup to Laura if she can't do it, so that I can get there? I think 5 years from now, and I wrote about this for OSDB Sports going into this weekend. This weekend to me was one of those events that we're not going to see the actual tangible impact of it until 3, 4, 5 years down the road, if not further, because we had things like Laura. We had her motivating a whole new group of people that get to look and go, oh, that is something I'm allowed to do. Until Saturday, that was a boys' club. And the only people that were allowed to call UFC fight night events and pay-per-views were men. That changed.
Yeah, and I do think there are props to be had for the UFC here as well.
Agreed, 100%.
And that's that we've spoken for a long time. Okay, Dana had his fucking stupid whatever views about there'll never be women fighting in the UFC. And then Ronda came out and was like, really? And he was like, all right, I'm an idiot. Fine, no stress. And
Right.
like now we are where we are. And some of the more dominant champions in the last little while have been females, right? Some of the more exciting fights we've seen, Wei Li Zhang versus Ioanni Jacek, just insane fights, right? And I think that what it shows me is now when we look at the landscape of fans, and, you know, we've got fans who have some pretty extreme views at the best of times. Very rarely do we see views about females not having a place on an MMA card, not having a place on the UFC card. And so that has come to me a lot of the way through Invicta and whatever, but it's been sort of brought into the mainstream by the UFC, because we have seen that there are very few gender lines when it comes. We've got a fight night card coming up, which may be the worst card in the world, but is headlined by 2 females. And that's not because, they're garbage. It's a great fight, but,
Right.
they're not, the UFC are not ashamed or shy to put females at the top of cards. We've seen it multiple times. I think now with this introduction, again, what you're saying is there's a glass barrier to be broken. And I don't think it's because the UFC were reluctant to put a female on comms. I just think that there wasn't a female who'd put in the work
Correct.
before Laura Sanko.
Correct.
To be on comms. And as soon as she's ready, the UFC notice that she's ready. She has her spot. And so I think that to me is something that I really like about the UFC, is where that there aren't really gender lines. It is, for the most part, a meritocracy. If you are fit to do the job, whether that be as a fighter, a marketing member, as somebody behind the scenes, as somebody front of house, they will give you that job. And that's something I think we should really praise the UFC for.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, from day one, the first female fight in UFC history was a pay-per-view main event. There wasn't any like, nope, you can't do this. Everybody gets paid the same within reason. They're all on the same scale, let's say. Not everybody gets paid the same. But it is something that I think for all the times we rightfully and fairly take aim at the UFC for different things, they have been pretty good about this the whole way through. And that's commendable. That deserves a tip of the cap. Congratulations to Laura. Congrats to John Gooden for getting a little more work. I hope that continues as well. I think Gooden is fantastic and want to see him get more opportunities, not just because he's a friend and he's been on previous shows, but because I think the amount of work he does and the preparation he puts into calling these events is tremendous. Now let's get to the fights themselves. Main event, Sergey Spivak goes out, just ragdolls Derek Lewis. I mean, ragdolls him for 3 minutes and a couple ticks before he chokes him out with a really quick, really, really clean arm triangle finish. Going into this one, for me, it was, is Sergey Spivak ready to take that step? Is Derek Lewis still that step? I think we got an answer to the latter, but I don't 100% know that we got an answer to the former, but it also still makes me really interested to see Sergey Spivak going forward, because you're doing the head rolls, you're doing the, I'm not all that impressed. So talk to me about it.
I'm impressed.
Okay.
I just think that we have seen, I said it on the preview show, I don't know what I'm going to see from Derek Lewis.
Yeah.
And what I saw in the very immediacy, Spivak throws a jab, Derek Lewis moves his feet, moves his head, and tries to counter, looks to counter. But as he bundles forward, he loses balance just a touch, and his front foot like sort of slides out and side, right? And that happens because this is a man that doesn't know how to fight conventionally. He knows how to brawl really well, and he knows how to pick his shots and counter when the chaos is ensuing. But that's street fighting, right? Like, street fighting for the most part is who lands the biggest shot first. And like, that's not me being disrespectful to Derek Lewis, because it took him to a UFC title shot. But if you're going to two UFC title shots, Jesus. If you're going to completely re-engineer the wheel, that takes a significant amount of time, and it takes a significant amount of body transformation, and it takes a significant amount of learning about that new body that you're trying to engineer, because Derek Lewis will have never used parts of his body in the sense that his coaches and himself will now be attempting to commandeer his body to do, right? And so I still stand by that there is some upside to Derek Lewis. He still looked in great shape. By the time that he'd finished, he hadn't broken a sweat. At the times that he'd been pulled down to the mat 6 or 7 times, he was fine to just get back up, and he wasn't exploding up either. He was actually looking,
working his way up. Yeah.
He was looking to bring his knees to his chest. He was looking to rotate through. And those are all signs of improvement. And for Spivak, I was the most impressed by the first takedown sequence and the fourth. So the reason why I wasn't that impressed with the others is because it felt to me just a touch, like some of those mat returns were panicked and they were just him trying to throw Derek Lewis to the floor
Right.
rather than actually take him down. Now, that against bigger and not bigger physically, but bigger as in, stature, divisional stature, and in terms of skill level, that's not going to work. Like, their balance will be better. Like,
Right.
if you tried, if Spivak tried to do the same takedown sequences that were 2, 3, 5, 7, and 9, or whatever it was, on a Sergey Pavlovich, he's not going anywhere. He's just going to stand there, right? Now, I understand that as Derek Lewis is getting up, he's off balance and whatever. But in comparison to the first, and I'll just break down why I liked the first so much, was they were just more sloppy. And that's something I need tightened up from a Sergey Spivak. But the reason why I like the first so much is because he understands what Derek Lewis is. It's a hands by the sides. I'm going to lower my level and come over the top with big bowling balls. And so he used that to his advantage. Derek Lewis tried to come in and fire one of those big bowling balls, and Spivak took a far side underhook and took an overhook on the other side. It's more of a stomp than it is a foot sweep, but it's MMA, right? Use what you can use. And he pulls on the underhook and lifts at the overhook as he tries to kick Derek Lewis's leg away. What he really wants is Derek to actually fall all the way to the mat, and he'll land himself in side control. But Derek sort of stumbles forward and lands his left foot on the mat. Now, Spivak realizes that Uchimata is there and so allows Derek to build his base back up, tightens his overhook, throws sort of a far side, I don't even know, it's like a fucking head and arm or a whatever it is, just throws his bicep across Derek Lewis's head to off balance him to the other side, steps across his hips and hits a clean Uchimata immediately into judo side control. And like, that was just gorgeous stuff. Like, really, really gorgeous. I think my only other criticism of Sergey Spivak is that he is too fixated on the actual finish, on the head and arm, because at any moment, as soon as he hit the judo side control, he's posting on the bottom of that elbow to try to get a head and arm. When Derek defends it, he's like, okay, cool. Hits him in the same turtle, looks for a head and arm again, doesn't get it. Like, that head and arm is there, and he wants it there all the time. And again, I think against better guys, if they know
against sharper competition, you can identify and go, oh, this is what he's going to be looking for. The interesting thing to me, or one of the interesting things to me, will be sort of to tie it to something we'll talk about later on. Adam Fugit in the fight with Yusaku Kinoshita, when they talked to him afterwards, he was like, yeah, why am I gonna chase these submissions when referees don't like seeing you smash guys with elbows? I think Sergey Spivak could learn a little of that, could take a little of that. Now, with Derek Lewis, it is a probably safer, cleaner path to attack submissions because his defenses aren't as good, as you're saying, as some of these higher level guys. Now you're going to be in with strictly the higher level guys. So you're going to have to find out some additionals. But to me, this was, and I don't say this as the like pat myself on the back because, hey, look, I was right. This was why I wanted to continue watching Sergey Spivak. This feels like a kid that is 28 years old, is figuring out, this is how I need to fight. These are the things I'm best at. Let me really strengthen them up, play to those advantages. Like, he looked like he could do that for 5 rounds, no problem. Like, we can keep doing this. He tossing Derek Lewis around, dumping him on his head. Granted, not the prettiest, not the most technical, but just ragdolling Derek Lewis for 3 minutes. That's a hard thing to do that most people aren't going to do. And so, you want to give me a few more years of this kid learning, improving, getting better, developing some of these things, taking some of these notes that you're saying that I'm sure his coaches are recognizing as well, and continue to get better. I'm very much in. I'm very much in.
Yeah. And I mean, the some of the takedowns weren't technical, right? Some of them were just he had
For
a grip,
sure.
pulled him, and then there were others that were really, really technical and really clever. Like
Yeah.
it was the fourth or the fifth, I can't remember. Derek gets up, he's in a back body lock, and he tries to pummel an underhook, and then like pull the grips up, and Spivak just sweeps him to the side that he's just trapped his own arm in. And so like that sort of stuff, that sort of positional awareness is really, really clever. But I need to see more of those takedowns rather than the I'm just going to bundle him to the mat takedown.
For sure. I do think that there is going to be a ceiling
for sure
to Sergey Spivak because of a thing we talk about all the time. When you get to a certain level, when you get to a certain point, athleticism becomes like he's not the athlete that Sergey Pavlovich is. He's not the athlete. We've seen him in there with Tom Aspinall, granted, prior to this run, but he's not that level athlete. So there's going to be challenges and hurdles in those regards. How do you overcome their athleticism? That's the next difficulty he's going to face going forward. But to get to this point from where he was early in his career and even early in this sort of overall run that has been really good, with the one loss being to Tom Aspinall, is a testament to his work and the effort that has gone in. And to me, it's the development that I like to see and why I watch every fight and care about every fight and want to pay attention. We're witnessing a fighter figure himself out and grow into now a top 10 fighter right before our eyes. The last question I have for you in regard to this fight is, what now for Derek Lewis? What is this? Dana White came out after the event and said, look, I love Derek Lewis. He's not going anywhere. He's got nothing to worry about, which commendable. Certainly appreciate that, right? Get that cleared up right away. But Derek Lewis will be 38 the day this comes out. So we are recording on Monday. It will come out on Tuesday. Happy birthday, Derek Lewis. I'm sorry you're celebrating off a loss. But he's 38 and he's 1-4 in his last 5 fights. And while you can make the argument that those are all against top 10 competition, if not top 5 competition prior to Sergey Spivak, it sort of makes you wonder what's left. What more is there? Does he want to keep doing this? He made the jokes as he does during the week of like, I got to keep fighting because my kids are getting bigger and got to keep buying them new clothes and they're always outgrowing all this stuff and all of that. But Derek Lewis has done well. Derek Lewis is fine financially. He doesn't need to keep going into the octagon to provide clothing for his children. So what do you do if you're the UFC? What do you do if you're Derek Lewis?
You do Chris Daukaus fights. No, that's what you do, right? Like we've complained over the last little while about insert crap heavyweight, Jared Van Der Aar or a Chase Sherman or one of these fellas. That's what you do, right? You take Blagoy Ivanov.
I was going to say the timeline is there for Derek Lewis, Blagoy Ivanov as the third fight on a fight night event in July somewhere.
Yeah. That's the level. Like now it's obvious Derek Lewis. So I think the thing that we saw with Sergey Spivak is that there is a very large crack in the heavyweight iceberg that's happening, right? And there are 7 guys maybe that are very legitimately streets ahead of the rest of them. And they're the new era of heavyweights. They're guys that can do a little bit of everything. And when they're doing it, they do it technically. It's a lot less of the slobber knocker, big man, lunchbox hands, throwing at each other, somebody falls down.
Right.
It is the Sergey Pavlovich. It is the when he's on Taito Avasa, although I think Taito Avasa is edging back towards the Derek Lewis type iceberg.
Correct.
It is the Sergey Spivaks. It is the, if he picks himself together, Alexander Romanov. It's the Tom Aspinalls. It's the Cyril Gagné. It's the Johnny Bones Jones. It's the Miocic. It's the Ngannou. Should they, eventually one day resolve that situation? Like that is the prominent iceberg that's drifting off into the sea of wonderfulness that is heavyweight MMA. And the rest is just this very cold, very secluded Jared Van Der Aar, and these fellas are keeping themselves alive because of the blubber around their middles. But like, just allow Derek Lewis to fight in there, allow him to sit at rank 8 to 10 or whatever it is, and just give him guys and put him in fun fights where they're not going to try and take him down.
Him and Jairzinho trying to knock each other out in the first 48 seconds.
Something like that, right? Like, I got no problem. If there's no threat of the takedown, Derek Lewis will fight well and he will fight fine. And until he's 42, 43, whatever it is, he can continue having 5 or 6 more fights on the contract he's on, make good money, and then ride off into the sunset, right? But like, what the UFC are right now, and we've talked about this, behind, you know, everything other than the fighters, it's pretty much a meritocracy type thing. When it comes to fighting, it's not a meritocracy type thing at all. It's a let's get bums on seats and eyes on TVs and let's do something that the fans will enjoy and that Dana will enjoy. Well, Derek Lewis fighting wrestlers is not something for you to enjoy.
Right.
And that's where he is.
Yeah, the last thing I was going to say there is we need to be careful not to turn Derek Lewis into the guy that is just dispatching talented emerging fighters. I don't need to see Derek Lewis against Jailton Almeida. I don't need to see Derek Lewis against, I mean, I think Jailton Almeida and Alexander Romanov would both take him to the ground and win handily, but I just don't even need to risk it. You've got the Jairzinho Rosenstrikes of the world. Just stay that course. Just go that way. Keep doing that. Do as you said. I mean, make him the new Andrei Arlovsky. Fine. Just keep him away from the guys that I want to see moving forward, fighting better competition. How much time do you want to spend on Devin Clark and Daeun Jung?
Devin Clark has the greatest thighs in the UFC.
He does. They are amazing.
Amazing.
Gigantic. That's it. That's all we need.
That's it.
That's it.
There was cage wrestling. It was crap. We can move on.
I tend to agree. Going in, my question was like, were we writing off Daeun Jung too quickly for one loss to Dustin Jacoby? No, we weren't. Turns out we weren't. This to me is sort of the example again. I said it in my takeaways piece or my recap piece on SevereMMA.com. We talk all the time about middleweight being crap and the lack of depth and the lack of talent and things like that. We need to start spreading that wealth around and include light heavyweight, because outside of about the top, maybe even before you get outside of the top 15, it gets real rugged real quick. And you're like, yeah. And like Devin Clark said all the right things, right? Came to his media afterwards and I'm tired of the inconsistency. I want to be the top guy. I love you, brother, but you're not going to be the top guy that you think you can be and all like that. Keep stringing together some wins and change my mind, but there was nothing here that makes me go, you know who might go on a run? Devin Clark, because I don't think that happens. Which brings us back to heavyweights. Marcin Tybura and Blagoy Ivanov. It was basically what we expected it to be. Two big European heavyweights. They spend the first couple rounds. I was going to say slinging and trading, but it's not really that. It's like throwing and exchanging, because there's no speed. There's no, great speed or velocity or danger to it. Tybura mixes things up a little bit better, uses those long teeps to the body, things like that. Comes out in the third round, isn't 100% sure where the cards may be, and says, well, I'm just going to catch this fella off guard and put him on the ground. And Ivanov can't get up, and that's the fight. Tybura, to me, as I said on the preview show, as I said during the week on my programming, he's the Neil Magny of this division. He's the guy that's going to win the fights that he really should, where he's favored. And then in the fights where he's the underdog, he's going to be a good test. He's going to give you a good fight, but he's not going to beat the guys that are ranked ahead of him. And I think we got confirmation of that on Saturday. Yeah, I agree.
Yep.
I agree. Yep. Move to Doo Ho Choi and Kyle Nelson, which ends in a majority draw. 29-27 from one judge for Choi, 28-28 from the two others. There was a point deduction in the third round for a headbutt. Choi was in Kyle Nelson's guard, sort of started to move in to close the distance, or I think was actually like trying to pull Kyle Nelson up a little bit, and they smashed heads. Chris Dione stopped it, took a point. Certainly it changed the outcome of the fight. What I said in my immediate recap piece. And I stand to it here, even as someone that had a colossal picks and plays swing based on that result. 2 very good plays went out the window because of this draw that would have taken me from a very not great losing night to a very lovely winning night. We criticize these officials for not taking points all the time, and Chris Taioni showed no pause and took a point. Whether you agree with it or not, I appreciate these are the rules, this is the thing, we're taking the point. Now, I don't think it merited a point deduction. I don't think it was as bad as, I think we saw one in Cage Warriors last year, a couple of years ago, the Jack Cartwright fight, which was egregious, repeatedly leading with his head, smashing into Jack Cartwright, eventually gets disqualified because he's headbutted Mr. Cartwright several times over. I can't remember the gentleman's name that was headbutting him. Yeah, 6 times. But I do appreciate that, look, this is the thing. This is what happened. It could have had a major impact on the fight. Away we go. Because otherwise, this fight kind of just made me a little sad. Because Doo Ho Choi is no longer Doo Ho Choi. I want to see the next one because it was 3 years off. But he struggled with Kyle Nelson. Your thoughts, good sir?
Yeah. So my first sentence, Nelson is certainly the stronger man here. In modern MMA, Doo Ho Choi is a 135er, and he looks a little slow. Like, look, he certainly, as the fight went on, warmed up into the fight.
Yes.
Certainly. There were moments like when Carl Nelson jumped on a rear naked and Choi did everything perfectly, manages to reverse the position, gets on top, gets straight to a crucifix, lands some damage. He's still Doo Ho Choi there, right? And he's still got the ability to get through bad positions and transition them into good ones for him. He's still able to crack a little bit. He's still able to do the things. It's just, to me, that those 3 years out are gigantic in terms of the evolution of MMA, in terms of the people on the roster in the UFC, in terms of the athleticism, the size, the power, the strength, their ability to understand what's happening in the fight game is just very, very, very different. Now, the headbutt, I mean, live, I had no idea what happened. I had no idea why they stopped it. And then on replay, the slow replay, I mean, they clash heads for sure. Does Doo Ho Choi intend to lead with his head? I don't know. I think that's up to the referee. And again, he was there live. He saw it. And he's as close to understanding the intention as anybody in that room. So, we should favor him. From my very comfortable seat a couple of 1,000 miles away, I would say I don't think it was a headbutt. But again, to your point, we criticize referees for calling fouls and not taking points. If you're going to take points, do it decisively, and he did. I'll also say that watching something on replay always makes it look worse.
Always.
Right? So it's very hard to
Which
judge.
is where, to me, in the moment, him stopping the fight is like, I'm glad he stopped the fight. I wish it was just stop the fight, take the point, and not have to consult the replay. Because as you said, a slow motion replay always makes things look worse. Always gives you that clearer picture of, oh yes, his head is coming down first. Right, but he's not in the moment thinking, I shall lead with my head.
Right. And for the fight itself, like, it was a close fight, right? Yep. It was a close fight. I think that Choi looked good in spurts. I think, there were moments when he was landing really big shots on Carl Nelson. I think the bigger shots went to Carl Nelson in the first round, but Choi did good work. It was tough to score. There was some really nice body kicks from Nelson. I think the thing that worries me from an overarching perspective, and what I wrote at like the end of my notes here, is Choi is just too happy taking shots. He's too happy taking a shot to land one, or he's too happy to be in the range to take shots because that's just the range he fights in. And Dana said, oh, he's going to give Choi his win bonus because he thinks that the point deduction was garbage. One, fair play to him. Maybe we should think about giving win bonuses to all fighters that lose because, well, it's fucking stupid. But like, if
just pay people straight up no matter what. Yeah.
Pay people because it's not going to make them fight any harder to have a win bonus. If anything, they'll make them fight more conservatively. Anyway, let's not do that. I'll be very interested to see who they do next. And I think that is the test next time. He's back in now, 3 years. He still looks in good shape. He looked well muscled. He looked like he was growing into the fight as it got later. Let's see who they do next. Because if they do someone crazy wild, right, then it'd be like the perfect matchup after seeing that for me would have been Nathaniel Wood. Obviously, he's got to fight, so that's a problem. But
yeah, but he's got to fight in a month. He's got to fight in 6 weeks.
Yeah.
And so timelines
depends what happens in that fight.
Yeah, you can make those things work potentially if everybody's healthy.
But
they can fight in July or August.
That's the fight, right? That's the fight.
Yeah, I would do it. I would watch it.
Do a bit of the wrestling. Yep. He's more than happy at the striking. And so if Dooho Choi wants to take some shots, Nathaniel will let him take some shots. And then we'll see.
So the thing to me, one on that is Dooho Choi needs to fight in the next 6 months. He needs to have come out of that fight healthy. He needs to fight the next 6 months because that's the only way you're capable of building on this. I do think, and I will allow that it's been 3 years, so let him shake off the rust. It is what it is. I think this fight to me also sort of underscores a little bit of the bloat of the UFC roster. Because to me, Kyle Nelson is best at 55, but he can't compete in the UFC at 55. Kyle Nelson, and I say this as like, this isn't meant to knock Kyle Nelson. I'm not taking shots at a fellow Canadian and a guy that trains where I grew up. He is a regional fighter. He is a guy that should be competing in CFFC, LFA, whatever Canadian promotions he wants to compete in, whether that's Unified or out here at Battlefield or BTC in Ontario. He is the guy that is the absolute tough sumbitch to fight on the Canadian regional scene and the best lightweight in Canada. And that's just who he's meant to be. We've seen that now through 6 appearances in the UFC. He should fight at lightweight. It allows him to A, not cut weight and therefore have greater energy and be able to use things more effectively. But at this level, he's outmatched physically at lightweight. We've seen that. And so to me, that's this fight was another reminder of, man, we need to, and it's, as you said, with Choi being in today's modern MMA, he's probably a 35. Agree 100%. And we have to sort of, as weird as this may sound to some people, we have to start tailoring the roster to what we have now and figure out the rest of it. I've advocated many times, we've talked many times of, I don't need to see people that when they lose 2 straight or 3 straight, we give them a chance to reinvent themselves somewhere else in a different division. No, I've seen the skills. God bless Kyle Nelson. He is a tough son of a bitch. He had a great career and has had a very good career outside of the UFC. It's been proven now that he can't hang at this level. Not consistently, not to a great success. Stop cutting weight. Go smash fools on the, and look, the regional circuit is not the UFC when it comes to pay, when it comes to opportunities. It's hard. It's especially hard for Canadians. There's limited events up here. There's not a lot of American shows that are looking to bring in Canadian UFC vets to face their local guy that they're trying to get over that's going to sell tickets. It's tough, but he's miscast as a 45 in the UFC. And it's going to be interesting to see what happens with him as well. We go to the first fight of the main card. Adam Fugit gets an upset win over Yusaku Kanishita, as I mentioned earlier. TKO with elbows from mount. This is why I really liked this matchup going in. I wanted to see Kinoshita against a guy that had some experience, that had fought good competition on the regional circuit, that gave a good accounting of himself in his promotional debut against Michael Morales, despite it being a losing effort. This to me was, hey, 23-year-old, you're not quite ready yet. You got some stuff to work on. And the 34-year-old quickly figured out, oh, these are the places I'm stronger. Let's just do this. What were your thoughts?
I was impressed with Adam Fujit. I think that there are certainly things that he needs to do to iron out some things, right? I felt like on the feet,
there are some things that he needs to do to iron out some things. Could you be more vague, sir?
I could try.
Please do.
There was, from the jump, there was a drastic difference with stance and range that both fighters wanted, right? Adam Fujit was a touch longer, but Kanishita fought very high up, very staunch, very available in his stance. His kicks were very dexterous. He stood a little like a mixture of Conor and Stephen Thompson, right? Where at any point, there was an ability for him to throw those high kicks, and we saw them. There's an ability for him to dive on in with big power punches, which we saw early and often. And I think that whilst that is a vast asset to his game, when you're fighting somebody like Adam Fujit, who's tall and rangy and tough and can wrestle, you have to be a little bit more measured in your approach. I'm not saying don't use the skills that you have.
Right.
I'm not saying change the way that you fight or the way that you approach the fight, but patience,
pull it back a little bit,
and economy are the things that are going to win you these fights. Because he landed on Adam Fujit. He landed a number of nice shots, but all of them were at 90% power. And what does that mean? It means that you're in the pocket for a touch too long. And when Adam Fujit was like, okay, cool, next time you throw one of these big shots, we're going to do some wrestling things, everything started to fall apart, right? I was very impressed with Fujit's relentlessness in his wrestling. Konishita made a concerted approach to consistently be attempting to build back to turtle, to get back to his feet, to find underhooks, to split his stance when he's against the cage, to make it hard for Adam Fujit. But eventually, I thought Fujit just was the more experienced, better fighter. And this will be, as you say, a learning experience for Kunishita. I think that there is some upside to him. He certainly looks like he can do a bit of the fighting. But this is let's relax slightly, as you said at the start. Yeah. Let's take our time a little bit. Let's listen to Trevor Whitman and let's go back to the drawing board.
Right.
Give ourselves that extra bit of space.
To me, it again is why we need guys like Adam Fujit on the roster. There is utility to them. There is value to them. I don't think anyone looks at him and goes, future champion, future contender. But you don't have to be. You can carve out a niche for yourself. You could carve out a lane for yourself, having success, being this guy. And if you string 2 or 3 together, then maybe you get a fellow veteran and a chance to graduate to being this guy at the next tier of things. But this is precisely the kind of fight I want to see for Contender Series graduates coming in their debut that don't have a bunch of experience. Give them somebody with some experience and let's see how they do. That's the test. Getting here is one thing. Having success here and staying here is a whole different ballgame. Kinoshita needs to figure some stuff out. I agree with you. There's still some upside. There's still some value going forward. Let's just take our time and see what happens. We move into the preliminary cards as we discuss here on the Severe Takeaways. E. Spencer Kite, Harry Powell, and the 4 Road to UFC finales starting, or I guess finishing, as it were, in the progression of things. In the lightweight division with Anshul Jubli wrestling the Jesus out of Jekasaragi, eventually getting a finish. Again, similar to Adam Fujit, punches and elbows. Why bother chasing those chokes when I can just smash you to death? A very clear, I have an advantage. I will play to this. Let's just go. It's a nice win. It's a nice win. It's a smart performance. It's a understanding yourself and your opponent performance. It's also one that, like, let's not go crazy here. Anshul Jubli has 7 fights. He is 28 years old and has 7 fights. So it's a good win. I'm happy to have him on the roster. Second fighter from India on the UFC roster. I am certain he will do better than the first, Bharat Kandari, who lasted 1 fight, got smashed by Sung Yadong and then was gone. But let's just wait and see. Your thoughts?
So, pronounce the second guy's name again for me, slower than the first time.
Jekka Saragi.
Saragi. Okay. So, Saragi has certainly got a Thai background, right?
Yes.
And you could tell with the ferociousness of those low kicks. It felt to me similar to the way that you've just said it. I think you summed it up really, really nicely. This is a smart performance by Jubli. I think Jubli on the ground knows exactly what he's doing. Everything was measured. The only thing I didn't like was the speed with which he dismounted for the head and arm in round 1. But look, if you think it's there and you think your man's done,
right,
you're going to go for it. And I got no problem with it, right? He very quickly managed to build back up and take Saragi back down. But the side-to-side hip movement, the elbows on top, the willingness to blend together, the damage and the grappling was great. I thought that he did really well to just disrupt Saragi. He did really well to frustrate him. He did really well to jam some of those pretty ferocious strikes coming towards him. The double unders. So there were 2 things I really liked from Jubli in this. One was he was body lock passing. He was looking to body lock pass. Now, Saragi tried to look for some omoplatas and some go-go platas and whatever, and quickly gave up on them because he realized that they weren't going to get him the results that he wanted. And Jubli just continued to pressure and continue to use that body lock. I'd like to see a more effective body lock pass in MMA, but I think that what we've just seen is the bones of what body locking can be used for, because it's an extremely tight, extremely pressure-filled position that doesn't give your opponent much room and much offensive options. And the other thing that I really liked from him is when he got to back mount, he flattened out his opponent properly. And what do I mean by properly? Well, he got double unders and he got double wrist grips on his opponent, and he just leaned his weight forward and he dropped his hip,
stretched him out. Yeah.
Just stretched him out. And there was a number of times, because if you're Saragi here and he's got double wrist grips, what have you got to do? Well, you've got to build back up to elbows in order to strip those grips, because you can't move your arms along the floor because there's weight on them, right? So in order for you to have to lift your elbows, what does it mean you're doing? Well, you're not defending your chin. And it's very hard for you to build to elbows and tuck your chin at the same time, right? So if I'm Jubli, I notice both of those things are available. And so I know that the more I flatten him out, I've either got options to just smash him and he's going to try and get up to his elbows.
Or the neck comes open.
I'm going to choke him. Or I can just continue to smash him.
Right.
And I really liked the perseverance to be, I'm flattening you. You can build back up. I'm flattening you again. And this is all just moral victories, right? You get flattened. It takes a lot of energy. And it takes a lot of moral perseverance from Saragi to just get back up again. It's deflating. And so whilst I think the last note I've written here is Jubli looked tired by the end of that round 2, and it looks like a lot of the pop of his own punches had gone and that the shots were labored to get the finish. And obviously Saragi was more tired and whatever, but I've written here that we need a lot more S&C from Jubli, because it looked as though this sort of game plan was the way that he would like to approach fights and like to win fights. And if that's the case, you shouldn't be tired in your own game plan, you know, or not that tired anyway. But first Indian-born fighter to get a win in the UFC. Congratulations to him. He wins his road to UFC final. That's great. Fair play to him. He's in a fucking stacked division. And so
perfect example of a fighter that now needs to take the next step. And that is find a gym that has some experience, that has all the things you're talking about in terms of strength and conditioning, all the coaching, all the everything, whether that's going somewhere in Thailand, whether that's going somewhere in China or Japan or the Oceanic region or coming to the North America. Like, the next step for him, and this is the thing that I think with a few of these fights in the road to UFC is, okay, we're at that point where, like, Anshul Jubli is probably one of the 5 best fighters in India overall, entire continent,
Almost so.
entire country, regardless of division. There were times years ago when we did the, like, oh, well, they were a Brazilian jiu-jitsu regional champion in Brazil, and that actually carried some value and weight because people didn't all have Brazilian jiu-jitsu and know the proper defenses and all of those things. But we quickly graduated to where that didn't matter. He's at that stage of, yeah, being the best in India is great. It got you to this point. Now we need to go to the next point. And that's going to be graduating somewhere else, taking yourself somewhere else where you're not the biggest fish. You are the smallest fish, and you can learn the most.
What I think I will say, though, and what I think is the most impressive, is that this is the beginning of something.
100%
in India, right?
100%.
You have a man that's coming out of India now, going in and winning a fight in the UFC, and okay, it may not be against the craziest guy, right? It may not be against the most skillful guy, but there's a man in UFC attire, kind of, in a UFC cage, for sure, on a UFC card, winning a fight. And doing so, showing some pretty dominant skills and some pretty fantastic technical prowess. And so that is a big signal to people back home, the people that he trains with right now, that it's possible. We talked at the start of this about how Laura Sanko was a break glass moment for female commentators. Jubli is a break glass moment for Indian MMA fighters. And
100%. It was part of what I wrote about in the representation piece on OSTB. And look, I want to give credit to local guy for me, Arjun Buller, very much proud, represented, and was seeking to show for his heritage of South Indian peoples, this is possible. I want to be somebody. Always uses the hashtag 1 million strong, got permission to wear his turban to the octagon, carried the mace, the whole 9 yards, all the tradition. Certainly had success in the UFC. And I don't say this as, again, this is second Canadian. I don't say this as a knock, but he is Canadian. It is somewhat different. Now there is, as you're saying, a man from India who trains in India, was born, raised, educated, learned in India. And everybody in that gym now looks and goes, holy shit, I can get there. I can maybe do this. Those are huge things that we have to acknowledge and have to give the UFC credit for. Whether you want to or not, folks, you have to. Any more on this fight? Shall we move on?
Let's move on.
All right. We move to the featherweight division. Jung Young Lee defeats Ija by split decision. This is a weird split decision to me. Jacob Montalvo gave Ija a 30-27. The other two judges in my books gave Jung Young Lee the correct score of 29-28. It wasn't the get you out of there in a hot second that Jung Young Lee had delivered throughout his progression. It, to me, though, was an impressive thing of just seeing him be able to get through those moments where plan A doesn't work and I'm forced to do some different stuff. I've got a battle and now I know what's coming and I can be a little more ready for it. Ija was going to wrestle from Jump Street and all the way through, and he had a good 6 minutes worth of wrestling in him. And Jung Young Lee was like, I can defend 6 minutes of wrestling. I can get through this. I'm going to be tired, but you're going to be more tired. And then I'm going to land more. And I thought it was just a solid overall performance. I don't think there's anything really like demonstrative to take away for either of these guys. As I said, throughout the week and on Saturday itself, we're not throwing anybody that won these competitions into the deep end of the talent pools. But there's room to grow, and there's a solid little foundation here for both guys. I would be happy to see both guys get an opportunity going forward.
Exactly what I was about
Let's
to say.
just build on it.
Exactly what I was about to say. Both of these guys looks like lower level, but UFC
capable.
Level.
Yeah,
absolutely. They both knew how to fight. They both knew where they were. Some of the transitionary moments to get into the grappling and away from the grappling from Jar, was good. Some really nice elbows on the way in, some nice dirty boxing, some nice ability to jump on the back and really like search for the back and hunt for the back. Yes, okay, he was a little aggressive in trying to attain certain positions. I think Lee was equally aggressive, trying to look for arm bars and things like this at the wrong times. Fine. But those were two guys that know what they're doing, know their way around both the striking elements and the ground elements, and went out and had a good fight. It was fun. I enjoyed it. Like, there was nothing bad about it. For Lee, he just hits harder, just hits harder. His punches are straighter, and he brings himself along with those punches. And that was the big difference in the scoring criteria. Like, I thought it was a close enough fight. When I saw split decision, I was like, oh, okay, this is going to be a really close fight. And I looked and I was like, okay, it's a little less close than I thought it was, but it's still a close enough fight, right?
Yep. Good fight. Give them both another continued opportunities. Let's bring them along slowly. I understand that Jung Young Lee wants to go. Dan Ige, Ilya Tapuria, Max Holloway, Alexander Volkanovski. Slow your roll, son.
Yeah,
just
he doesn't
slow your roll. You don't want to do that. That would be 4 consecutive losses in a combined 3 minutes and 8 seconds, and then you're fighting somewhere else. Enjoy being in the UFC. Fight some lower level fellas. Get some wins. Move to bantamweight. Rinya Nakamura shines the way that he was expected to shine. I was messaging with Ian O'Neill during this event. He hit me with a "oh wow," and I hit him back with a like, "this is why I'm so angry that I flubbed the end of the preview show." So if anybody that watched the preview show, Ian threw to me to discuss the 4 finals of the Road to UFC. I talked about the first one, gave a little pause for Ian to set me up for the bantamweight final. And he was like, "Oh, I guess Spence is done." And we just wrapped, and it was really awkward. And when we closed, Harry was like, "Oh my God, you guys totally shit the bed. Totally miscommunicated. And I didn't talk about any of this." But Rinya Nakamura is really good. He's really good. There's some stuff that he needs to clean up, and he needs to be a little less willing to just stand in there and sling kitchen sinks at another man. But he's got kitchen sinks, and he's got a whole bunch of wrestling, and he's only been a pro for 18 months. And if we're going to throw anybody from the road to UFC right into the thick of it, give me Rinya Nakamura against the top 30 bantamweight tomorrow. This kid is the goods.
So my first line, I'm just going to read this out. Good Lord, that was insane. Kazama ran across the cage with the whole B&Q stock list in his back pocket. Tries to put Nakamura on the back foot and did so successfully for a single exchange. Like, look, Nakamura in this fight to me didn't seem like he wanted a 33-second finish.
No.
He was happy to fight on the outside.
And he didn't throughout the tournament. So the thing I said, sorry to cut you off, the thing I said going through last week leading into this was Jung Young Lee is the guy that went out and got these sub 1 minute finishes because he was going out there slinging bombs looking to put you away, where Rinya Nakamura came out and was like, "I'm far better than you, but I'm going to figure this out, and I'm going to not take a ton of punishment, and I'm going to just beat you, and it's going to be in the first round because I'm that much better than you, but I don't need to go batshit crazy." Continue.
And he's happy to. I think he was actually a little shocked, if I'm honest, a little flustered with the raging matador bull man running across with a big orange and black B&Q sign above his head. And like, if you're not in the UK, you may not get that reference, but B&Q is like a warehouse wholesale, building supply type.
Okay.
Deal.
Home Depot, North America. Home Depot.
Exactly. And he brought all the
Home
things.
Depot.
Yeah, depot. Yeah, I don't know what a depot is. It's fucking weird. Anyway, but after the first exchange, when Nakamura gets caught, I think with a couple of straight shots, he immediately pivots off and was like, "Oh, okay,
This is what we're doing. Fine. Yeah, great."
Kazama comes running at him again, and Nakamura takes a step out and catches him with a check left hook. And Kazama's like, "Oh, I fucked up. I did bad things. Bad things have happened. I am an idiot. Bad things are happening." And then he starts to backpedal, and Nakamura's like, "My turn now."
Yeah. You've poked the bear, and now the bear wants to do bear things.
Right. And the straight left hand was just vicious. And then the way that he posted his hand on the far shoulder and just doinked Kazama for the coffin nail, completely unnecessary, but I totally understand that what's your man's name? What's the referee? Dom Cruz had a problem with him.
Keith Peterson
like saw the left hand late, was behind Nakamura when the left hand
was figuring out his
no problem with it.
Spacing,
at all. And as soon as he saw the left hand, he was diving on Kazama to save him. But just the little doink and the head bounce was just like poignant, right? So in the third, I was gonna do the spotlight on either Jubilee, Nakamura, or our boy Tatsuto Taira, and I just thought for 33 seconds of work,
it's tough to get through.
How I was going to get 900 words,
right?
And so I was like, okay, next time, my friend.
I was going to say there will be future opportunities because Randy Nakamura looks to be the goods, looks to be the real deal. Now that's saying it coming out of Road to UFC, not against absolute great competition, but good fighters, to be fair. The thing that from day one of prepping for Road to UFC to now that continues to intrigue me about this man, there's a couple. The under 23 world champion freestyle wrestler. We talk all the time about wrestling being such an important base, and we give plaudits for things like All-American and things like that. Under 23 world champion. World champion. Everybody on the planet that wrestles at that weight class competing against one another, this man was the one that stood on the top of that podium. And he's throwing those hands 18 months in. Give me 18 more months and I don't want to go overboard. Give me 2 years and he's a top 10 fighter.
All right.
2 years and he's a top 10 fighter.
Neil, relax. Okay.
2 years and he's a top 10 fighter. February 6, 2025. Provided health. 2 years and he's a top 10 fighter. That's my Shawnee Podcast's bold prediction.
I will not say that.
That's fine. You don't have to. Say it. I'm not here to pressure you.
Just because I've seen 33 seconds of fighting.
100%. We move to the flyweights. Hyung-Sung Park gets the third round finish over Sunguk Choi. It went the way that I expected it to go. This was the difference between these two men throughout the road to the UFC tournament. Choi was somewhat content fighting, as Ian said on the preview, fighting not to lose. Wasn't necessarily fighting to win, while Hyung-Sung Park throughout was always fighting to win. If that meant chasing a position and being a little more aggressive and it cost him, fine. And it cost him at spots in this fight. But in the third round, he found that finish. It was a good win. I think similar to the featherweights, both of these guys can be UFC fighters and should probably get an opportunity. And again, I just want to see more. Let's just see more training, more development in there with some UFC talent and give it time.
I felt a bit bad for Choi, to be honest, because he flash knockdowns Park twice. He's clearly got power in his hands. He can do a bit of the striking, right? But like you say, when you flash knock down your partner or your opponent twice. My boy, you know the power is in your hands. Go and chase that motherfucker and try and nail him to a wall, you know? And so I was impressed with Park's stick-to-itness, similar to Adam Fujit, where he was like,
Yes.
I just think I'm better here, and I'm going to be able to do these things more efficiently. And eventually when he gets there, really, really, really nice. Really, really, really nice.
I don't think we need to spend a ton of time on my boy, the Iron Turtle, Jung-Young Park, getting the win over Dennis Tululin. It's a good win. I still think there's something about Jung-Young Park that is, you know, every week it seems there's a middleweight that I'm like, can this guy make a run? He maybe can.
Look,
he maybe can, because he doesn't mind throwing hammers. It's not the thing he should do, but he's pretty solid on the ground. He did well once he got Tululin to the ground and just was like, oh, cool, I'm better here. We're gonna smash, and then I'm gonna grab this finish. And he put him right to sleep.
Firstly, this fight was very sad to me. Very sad. Because Tululin by the end, honestly, had a 10,000 yard stare, let alone 1,000 yard stare. And I think the groundwork was actually Tululin just being an idiot more than Park being good at what he was doing. I have not seen a fighter try and sit up in mount before. And to people, anyone watching this, don't do that. It's dumb. Because Park was like, I'm going to elbow you back to the floor. And he's like, okay. And then the fifth time of answering is like, maybe I'll turn my back. Like, Tululin did not have a clue how to get out of mount. There was no kipping. There was no knee and elbow escapes. There was no attempt to bridge. There was no attempt to roll to his back and keep his knees tight. There was just nothing. He just tried to sit up and hope that Park would stop hitting him. And he didn't. And for Park, like, he has an okay jab, but he stands in a weird stance. Like he sort of has too much weight on his front foot, and you can tell when he's fighting, and he's a bit labored in there. He doesn't move great. His center of balance isn't fantastic, but he's got takedowns, and his passing was nice, and his ability to continue the takedowns and grind through positions was kind of fine. But can he make a run in middleweight? Probably. Could he make a run?
Right. Any other division? No, but in middleweight,
Park, probably not.
In middleweight, can he put together 2 more wins to face a top 10 guy or a top 15 guy?
Yeah,
probably. You wrote your severe spotlight about the still undefeated, still emerging, still beautiful to watch Japanese flyweight prospect Tatsuro Taira, who goes out, gets swept off his feet with a kick in the first exchange. As he's clambering to his feet, gets latched into an arm and guillotine, but just kind of hangs out and is like, I'm fine. I'm on the opposite side. Like, we're okay here. He doesn't have a lot of space. We're up against the fence. I'm going to get out of this. And when he does, he's like, oh, great, cool. Here, we're just going to finish now. We're just going to be done. You had your moment. You had your one opportunity, your one chance. You didn't capture it. And I'm going to finish you. Please tell me, good sir, how much you love the man from Okinawa, Tatsuro Taira.
Yeah, my boy can do the fighting. I'm sorry, he can. So
I have a question for you when you're through this that I can't wait to get the answer to.
Okay, so in my spotlight, and I'll say this, and if you've gotten this far, then thanks very much for watching this far. I appreciate it. I think this might be the best spotlight I've written. I had a lot of fun writing it, and I felt like I got a lot of the details that people maybe didn't see. One of the things I wrote in my first spotlight for Tatsuro Taira was that he needs to slow the fuck down and have a little bit more composure and a little bit more patience. At the start of this fight, I think he had too much composure and patience. Right. Because he just sort of nonchalantly walked out to the middle, and right. Aguilar was like, how's that leg, son? And he's like, what leg? And then he's on the floor, right? And so there is a balance to these things, and this is a young man that is learning these balances, and what we saw wasn't that Aguilar dived on a neck necessarily. No. It was as Tatsuro Taira came back up, Aguilar chased him down with a left body kick, and Tatsuro Taira caught that body kick, shelved the leg, and took him down with an inside trip. Aguilar was like, oh, balls, and jumped on a head and arm. On an arm in guillotine. Now, I won't go into the vast nuances of the. I spent like 4 paragraphs breaking down an arm and guillotine on the Spotlight. So if anyone wants to know how an arm and guillotine works, please go and read that. But as the immediacy, go and watch the fight back. When you're finishing an arm and guillotine or a guillotine of any form, the main thing you want to be able to do is close the shoulder of the choking arm further down your back. That's going to crunch the person that you're choking's chin towards their chest, and that's going to get you one of the 4 pillars of what's going to get you that choke, and probably one of the most important ones, right? Tatsuto Taira, as he hits the mat, realizes in a guillotine, and so flops himself to the other hip, forcing Aguilar onto the other hip, which means that Aguilar has less leverage to crush Tatsuto Taira's neck because Tatsuto Taira has sprawled in a way that allows his spine and his head to be in alignment. Genius. Insane genius stuff, right? Then he takes his time and he goes through a plethora of options to work his way out of the guillotine. He doesn't make the common mistake of fighting the hands too early because he realizes that as long as he can move his hips and Aguilar can't move his hips, he's probably not getting finished unless Aguilar has a mad squeeze, which clearly he does not. He works his way slowly, asking 4 or 5 questions of how he can get out of this guillotine, and eventually manages to limp arm the arm that's in the guillotine out. Aguilar has to let go, otherwise he's going to get smashed up. Taira then plays a really interesting dilemma, gets head and arm control, starts to do the smashing. The one thing that I really loved, and that I've not seen in MMA before, is Taira was looking to pass from that half guard situation, that smashed half guard situation. What you see a lot of the time is guys get a far side underhook, they tripod up really high, shook their knee out, and then knee cut to the other side or go to a 3/4 mount and just start smashing, right? Taira really wanted the full mount. And to get to the full mount, as he brought his knee up from the tripod, instead of taking a far side underhook, he used the shoulder pressure and a deep far armpit grip and took like a reverse C post on Aguilar's far leg so that he knew that he had the time to limp leg out immediately to mount instead of just smashing. And I talk about it on the Spotlight, and you can go back and watch it because I had to watch it 2 or 3 times to work out what he actually did, because as Taira had tripoded up and started to take his leg out of the entanglement, Aguilar looked like he made a last-ditch effort to lock up that leg. But I couldn't tell why Tatsuto Taira was able to win that exchange. And the reason he was able to win that exchange is because he held the ankle of Aguilar just enough that he could pummel his leg out and into full mount. And that shit was gorgeous. Then we get to the mounted triangle, and again, Taira did all the right things. He locked up a straight-on body triangle, straight-on triangle. Aguilar did the right thing, which he created what's called a triangle frame, and that's basically getting your elbow and your hand on the top of your head, and it opens your shoulder enough and reinforces with your elbow to your head, so it makes it really hard to close the shoulder. Taira cut a corner. Aguilar changed the angle, leant into the corner really nicely, and then Taira just underhooked the leg. Aguilar made a mistake, stood up, got his armbar, finished. Wonderful. I like, as you've just said, when we see fighters progress, right? We talked about Spivak all at the top, and we're going to talk about it here and now, right? Tatsuto Taira went into the first fight and made some mistakes because he was trying to be too aggressive. He's obviously seen that and came out and was trying to be patient in this fight. The patience shown in that guillotine and the patience shown in the positions that followed is ultra impressive to me. Now, when he fights the next guy, please don't get leg kicked into oblivion immediately, because that's stupid.
Right.
But
at 23, to be showing that poise and that understanding of, I'm fine here. The reason I said going into it, the reason I'm okay with this fight, because it's a weird matchup, right? Taira's 2-0 in the UFC, already beaten 2 Contender Series graduates, and now he gets a third. The reason I was okay with it was, let's see how you do as the minus 1,400 favorite, who's supposed to smash, who's supposed to roll, and maybe gets into some danger. And he got into a little bit of danger. Now, it wasn't grave danger, but he had to show that poise. And the fact that we see it at 23 in just his third UFC fight, in just his 13th fight overall, these are the indicators. I know Sean hates it when you talk about intangibles, but that's an intangible. That's a thing you can't measure outside of seeing it in action. There are lots of dudes who would make horrible choices in that spot and get caught. Right? They would make the wrong decisions. They would do the wrong things. They would panic. They would get too anxious. And Aguilar is able to lock up and away we go. And I've got your neck and big upset. Tayara was just like, all right, fine. Well, let me see where we are. Right. We're against the fence. So you can't come this way. And this is the wrong. And I'm over here in the right spot. So we're just going to hang out. You can keep trying to squeeze if you want. You're not going to get it. You're going to blow your arms out. So great. Cool. When you let go, I'm going to crush you. Give me all of this 23-year-old. And the question I have for you, good sir, we will end on this. Tatsuro Taira or Muhammad Mokaev? Who's the better prospect? Who gets to where they want to go first?
That's a very interesting question. So I think skill for skill, the answer is probably Muhammad Mokaev.
I agree. But I think there's another thing coming from you that I also agree with.
I think mentality-wise,
yeah, there we go.
The answer is Tatsuto Taira. Now, I will buffer that with one thing. I recently saw Muhammad Mokaev talk on his Instagram a little, and he openly said in the last two fights, and especially in the last fight, I was playing too much. I was trying to build a name. I was trying to be exciting.
Fine.
I understand that I can't do that now. I understand that I have to fight properly, and I have to fight for every position to be dominantly won by me, and I can't give anything away.
All right. Then I look forward to seeing the fight with Jafel Filo in London to see him put that into application. And if he does,
boy,
if he does, I am telling you, we are telling you today, recording on February 6th, to your earballs and eyeballs on February 7th, that these two men will meet at the top of this division somewhere down the line. Health provided. They are that good. This division is so bonkers. I started saying it like end of last October that flyweight is going to be the one that comes along and is front and center to start this year. It is. Tatsuro Taira is the goods. I'm so excited about this division going forward. I'm so excited to look forward this week to UFC 284. Arguably my favorite fight. The best fight to me, the best fight that the UFC can make at this time. Number 1 versus number 2, Islam Makhachev versus Alexander Volkanovski. Myself, Harry, Ian will be previewing it later this week. I will be talking about it all week here on this platform. And then next Tuesday, we will be here discussing the fallout and everything that happened. And I cannot wait for it. Good, sir. I know you have got to run. It is always a pleasure to do this with you. Folks, if you want to read that breakdown, and I really do recommend you read the breakdown. They are phenomenal. Gets into the nuts and bolts of it all. It's why I like having him here. I talk about stories. He talks about technique. It makes for a good pair. It's like peanut butter and jelly, even though Harry doesn't like peanut butter. He is Harry Powell. Go follow him at BJJ_Harry Powell. Follow myself at Spencer Kite. Follow all the lads from SevereMMA. Sign up for the Patreon. It is still early in the month. That makes it the best deal in the world. SevereMMA.com/pints. The best URL in the business. It's been a blast. We love you. We appreciate you. I hope you have a wonderful week. I'm going to talk to you next week.